Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is game 2 from the 2023 World Chess Championship match. On the white end, Liren, and he's playing against Nepomniachtchi. Both players have a half point going into game 2, and an interesting start to this one, which saw a d4 based opening, unlike game 1, e4 based. On move 4, we had h3. Certainly caught me by surprise. I'm certain I wasn't the only one. What is this about? I can't say with the certainty. I know that Liren shared after the game that his second, Richard Rapport, recommended this. What is it about? It's a useful move. First of all, it's likely to be a useful move in plenty of lines, and maybe with h3, White's trying to pull Nepomniachtchi into a line he's not as well prepared for as Liren. Tough to say exactly. Now, some suggestion I have for you when you're playing your own games, if you encounter a move that you haven't seen before, or something that seems a little bit eccentric like this h3, what is it about? Something you could say to yourself is, well, suppose my opponent in this position went with a more standard move, something that's developing like knight c3, bishop g5. What are good replies to those moves? A good reply is d takes c4, so why wouldn't d takes c4 be good in reply to h3? I don't think there's a good reason not to continue with d takes c4 in this position. This is the move that black plays in reply to h3. It's not the only way, but just try to make sensible moves. Don't get too thrown off, is what I'm getting at, if you see a not-so-common move. Another way to react is, my opponent's playing on the edge like this? Well, let me act energetically. Let me play in the center with c5, very sharp. Okay, in this game, it's d takes c4. Now we could, we end up continuing with some standard play from this point on. e3. Just looking to regain the pawn. Black says you could have it back, but let me put pressure on your strongest pawn. c5. Bishop takes c. a6. Hinting at queenside expansion. b5 nearby. Castles, knight c6. Knight c3 and b5. So where would you go with the bishop in this position? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, important moment. It's a very fine detail, but the bishop decides to go to d3. Note that if you're putting your bishop on e2 instead, you pretty much are not able to follow up with the move a4. Because after b4, the knight would have to go back home. And it would really prefer to react in the forward. So the bishop is better placed on d3 if you do want to continue with a4, and normally you would, as white, want to play a4. It's usually a good idea to have your rook pawn attack a knight pawn. This is desirable, looks to activate the rook. Okay, bishop d3 prepares to next play a4. And be in a spot to meet b4 with now knight e4. The bishop is supporting knight to e4. Okay. Bishop b7. a4, b4, knight e4. Knight a5. So this is where we could have a quick look at the clock times. I forgot to include the clock times in game 1, in the video with game 1. Some of you were kind enough to remind me of that, so thank you. This is where there was a big think by Liren. He spent about 33 minutes on his 12th move, and he ended up picking knight takes knight. And as he shared in the press conference, he was expecting his opponent to reply with queen takes knight. But we did not have queen takes knight, it was g takes knight. Now, before I go down this line, what I want to share is the other main decision, because something has to be done with the knight on e4 at this stage. It's hit twice. Got to make a decision. Do you take on f6 or do you take on c5? So if you capture on c5, as Liren mentioned in the press conference, he felt that this was tending towards a much more drawish position. Paraphrasing. But if knight takes c5, this is how play could continue. We could have several exchanges. We could go right into an ending, essentially a major piece specific ending. After bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, white is temporarily up a pawn, but it could be regained with knight to d7. And this is the big line where we go into mass exchanges. In the end, black emerges down, well, white emerges up a pawn, but has a fractured kingside structure. This is still considered very equal. The extra pawn white has in this ending is not really a threat. It's sort of a backward pawn, tough to even get that guy going. Okay, considered an evenish position. Not the path white goes down. He goes with knight takes knight. Was expecting queen takes knight, and he mentioned that he was prepared to follow up with e4 with ideas of bishop g5 or e5. Well, forget about bishop g5. Black captures with the pawn. So an interesting structure on the queen side, the king side. Are we going to have a case of opposite sides castles? Well, it sure seems like that's the direction we're going in. When black is capturing with this guy, do you really want to have your king on this side of the board? It's damaged on that side. Do you want to go on the queen side? You don't really have much pawn coverage. In the end, having the king tucked away on the queen side is probably the safer side, seeing how this guy is already pointing right at h7. You don't have minor pieces around as well to watch out for the king when he's on the king side. At least these guys are around to add some support to queenside castled position. Okay, with g takes f6, a couple things here. You're watching over these key squares from knight hops, and the rook is ready to coordinate really well with the bishop on b7, who is, in my estimation, the star piece in this position. It's pound for pound the best piece. And it's going to be coordinated really well on g2. Now, from here, the follow-up is e4. This allows black to follow up in a very nice way. Considered one of the better moves is to first capture on c5 and have this position open up a little bit more. I think in general, this is really the approach to take in a position where the black king is still in the center. There's a fractured kingside structure. It's maybe a little bit scary to be on the queen side. In general, try to open up the position. The king is still in the center, after all. The more open lines, the more likely you could maybe get at the black king. Now, in the game, d takes c5 was not played. And because it wasn't played, black now has the opportunity to sort of shut things down. c4. There will be no d takes c. There will be no open c file once black is castled on the queen side. And these guys provide some nice coverage, even though they are extended. They're in white's house, but they still act as a nice shield for the black king when he is castled queenside. Bishop c2, queen c7, one move out now from queenside castles. Bishop d2, rook g8, rook c1, still castles. You might think, rook on c1, why would I want to go queenside castles? I have a king and queen here. Can you take advantage of that? Not really. Now, this is where white starts to go astray. He ends up picking bishop to d3, trying to do something on this file, trying to break down the c4 point. Considered one of the better moves, or really the best move, is queen to e1, pinpointing b4. Now, black has a good reply in the event of queen to e1. That reply would be f5. And unfortunately, the suggestions here by the engine, they're not fun to play these moves, but this is considered the best play after the continuation queen e1, f5. You ready? It says, get your king to h1, and then next move your rook to g1 to secure g2, because you're going to experience some problems here if you don't. With these moves in, king h1, rook g1, and some security over g2, this knight is now free to go elsewhere. Okay, not easy moves to follow up with from this position. Something else I should note is that after queen e1, f5, this guy here on b4 would be poison. f5, in a way, is indirectly defending b4. Why is that? It's because after bishop takes b4, this queen is overloaded. She has 2 jobs too many. Black would be able to follow with bishop takes b4, queen takes b4, and f takes e4. The knight is hit, and probably nearby there's a move like e3, unleashing the bishop on g2. Okay. In the game, it's bishop to d3, king b8, very sensible. Off of the c file, off of the same file as the rook. Rook e1, f5 hits. Black is definitely for choice here. The main thing that sticks out to me about this position is the opposite sides castles, and that white is experiencing more problems with his king position than black is. There's really no concern over the black king. How are you getting at that black king? This is much more serious. The bishop on b7 is amazing. Look at how well it's coordinated on not only e4, but g2, however indirect that is. Okay. Play follows with bishop to c2. What's the problem? What's the idea behind f5? What's the problem with the capture on f5? Can you spot the star move if white had played e takes f5 instead of bishop c2? You ready for this one? Feel free to pause the video. Can you spot the sharp move? Okay, here we go. It would be rook takes d4. This rook is poison. If you take it, you're going to get mated. Knight takes rook would be met with rook takes g2. King in the corner, mate. You hang a left, you're still going to get mated. It's just going to take a little longer. With rook takes f2, queen h2, king there, that's mate, king here. These bishops are wicked. Game over. All squares covered. That would be a sharp ending. So it just highlights, that variation right there really highlights the strength of the bishop on b7. Very nice tactical shot as soon as this pawn is not on e4 with rook takes d4. Okay, in the game, bishop c2. Very tough to play a move like that. I mean, just moments ago, the bishop went from c2 to d3, and now it's going back to c2. So totally undoing your move. In a position that's dynamic like this, opposite sides castling, where timing is all, so important in opposite side castle positions. So it's very difficult for white. Knight c3, pinpointing d4. How do you defend that? Bishop e3, believe could be met with f4, and the bishop would be rocked back to d2. d4 is collapsing. Queen has a watchful eye over that as well. Okay. Not easy to defend this. What is tried is bishop to g5, which is asking for an exchange sacrifice. Nepomniachtchi didn't spend much time on this, I believe about 5 minutes. Rook takes bishop. Knight takes rook, and a big pawn is taken out right in the center. Knight takes d4. Looking to potentially get the material back. Knight b3 is a way to hit both the rook and the queen. Also note, this guy right here on c4, really valuable pawn. A candidate passed pawn. Just moments away from queening. Okay, queen h5 is the follow-up. Not knight takes bishop here. Black makes use of this post from d4. The knight covers e6. So he first gives the knight on g5 a kick. It goes back to f3. You could also consider capturing on h7, but computer's pointing out, just develop your pieces, bishop c5. Let's say after knight takes f6, move forward again, and look at all of these aggressive pieces. There's probably going to be an accident happening soon on f2. As a quick example, let's just say some queen move, knight to f3. This is there all of a sudden. Looking at some continuation with queen g3, taking advantage of the pinned f-pawn, rook d2 in some lines. This is a mate in 5 from here. Not saying queen there in that position was greatest, but black could continue developing and have a very strong attack. In this game, it's knight f3. Knight takes bishop, rook takes knight, bishop takes pawn, rook is hit, rook d2. There's a way that white could go wrong. Don't exchange rooks. This would let white off the hook. This is a decisive position. This is a winning position for black. In the game, it's bishop d6, preserving the rooks. Another move is to just go here. Avoid the rook exchange, being a spot to advance the candidate passed pawn. In this game, it's bishop d6. If you capture on d2, why is that a problem? Let's see. White recaptures, and there's 2 problems here for black. One, the bishop is ready to get tracked down. Black will win a pawn. And there's this idea to sneak into e8, which is essentially forcing a queen exchange. Otherwise, you're losing the bishop. So for example, bishop d5, let's say you parry the threat on e4. White would be able to follow with queen e8. You have to block. You exchange queens, and the king is pulled to the c file, which now sets up knight takes c4. Bishop c4, rook c1, you get the piece back. White is the side for choice. Considered a +1 from here. Okay, no rook takes rook. Bishop d6 in this game. King h1. Push the pawn. B takes c, b takes c. This is not, look at the clock times. That's not an error. That is very close to the remaining time Liren had at this stage in the game. And so this is a minute, just under 2 minutes, or around 2 minutes. And that is to complete the first 40 moves. He still has a lot of moves to play before gaining an extra hour. You gain an hour at move 40. There is no increment until you make your 61st move. So it's a bad position. The clock time is probably just, a symptom of the bad position. So from here, what do? Rook d4. There really isn't much you can do as white. All black has to do is push the pawn. He does just that. White tries to stop it. Queen h6. But just one more move in this game. e3. Move 29. White ends up resigning. What do you do here with the rook? There isn't a safe square. All of these are under black's control. And the only square you could go to is d2. But if you go to d2, you're blocking the queen's view of c1, black would be able to simply promote. Play goes no further. Nepomniachtchi takes game 2. So this is a big result. It is not so common to see in World Chess Championship play a player go down with the white pieces and to be defeated in just 29 moves. So this one really got away from Ding Liren. It was this big moment when the knight was on e4, that decision to take on f6. He really didn't expect that particular structure, and he didn't find, as he said himself, he didn't find a way to position his, essentially to position his pieces, well enough, and it collapsed very quickly in this one, unfortunately. So hopefully he can rebound. There is a rest day before we get to game 3. Let's have a look at the tail to tape on this one. You can see how accurate these guys are. It started to go downhill right around the knight f6 point. So we had 3 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, 1 blunder for Ding Liren, 86% accuracy for him, 95 accuracy for Nepomniachtchi. The blunder, that's not where the game got away from Ding Liren. It wasn't the mistake either. It was this first inaccuracy. So knight takes f6. It was preferring knight takes c5 in that position. Nepomniachtchi followed up perfectly with g takes f6, taking on those doubled f pawns and playing along the g file in the end. Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.